And let's finish this, the 13th chapter of Scrub Dog of Alaska. I got cut off mid-paragraph yesterday, so we'll go back to the beginning of the paragraph I got cut off in. As I said before, that's not the point. If Terry took your money, I want to know it. He'll earn it somehow and pay back every dime. We'll straighten this out in the morning and everything will be all right. It's not a tragedy, just a problem. Families have them all the time. We had some pretty serious ones long before you came. I just want you to know that and not worry. He stood up to go. You're a lot like Dad, David said. We had the same parents, you know. He tousled David's hair. Remember, this is your home every bit as much as it is Grace and Terry's. He opened the door. If you get hungry, go down and eat, here? Yes, David said, and thanks, Uncle George. David listened to his uncle's feet going downstairs. Maybe they'd get everything straightened out tomorrow, but it would never be all right again. His aunt wasn't going to change the way she felt about him. Terry didn't like him, and now David admitted it was mutual. Grace and his uncle were the only ones who cared about him. His presence split the family. He had never belonged, and he never could. He could not stay here any longer. He began thinking of Aurora, his old home, the trap line, and Scotty. He thought of Noble and the dog team. The Moores had said he could have them any time he came back. He belonged back in Aurora, in his own home, doing what he knew best, hiking the mountains and tundra he'd always known. David rose and cracked the door open slowly. And cracked the door open slightly to hear the sounds below. Then he went back and lay down and waited. Gradually the house quieted down. He closed the door and began to gather up the few belongings he'd brought. He stuffed them into the old knapsack. When he finished, he stood looking about the room. Then he remembered the little ivory dog and took it from the dresser drawer. A wave of loneliness went through him as he thought of all the things Scrub and he had done together. David found a piece of paper and studied over leaving a note. Finally he wrote, I'm sorry for everything. I'm going where I belong, to my mother's people. I know who they are. Please don't try to find me. I'll be fine. Thanks for keeping me. He opened the door carefully and listened. All was quiet and dark downstairs. But still he waited. The clock chimed the half hour, then the hour. He counted 12. Carrying the knapsack, he went carefully down the stairs. At the foot, he turned into the hall, past his aunt and uncle's door, then Terry's, then Grace's. He eased it open and stepped inside. David leaned over the bed and placed his hand over Grace's mouth. Her eyes flew open. Be quiet, he whispered. She sat bolt upright and whispered, Davy, what are you doing? Leaving, he said. You can't, she whispered. Yes, I can. Don't, Davy, she begged. Everything will be all right. Wait till tomorrow. Dad'll make Terry pay you back every cent. I know Terry took your money. I saw him skating almost every night. He didn't work any place. I couldn't say it down there, but I will now if it'll help. David shook his head. I never should have come here, he whispered. I don't belong. Wait and let Dad take care of it, please. When Uncle George finds out tomorrow, it'll just make everything worse. I came to tell you goodbye and give you this. He handed her the little ivory dog. She held it in her hands. It's Scrub, she whispered. I'll always keep it, Davy, always. She looked up, her big eyes round in the room's dark. Where'll you go? I left a note in my room, David said. I'm going to my mother's folks. Do you know where they are? Yes, he said, but it's better if I don't tell you. You don't want Dad to find you? She said. How will you go to them, Davy? I met some people down at the docks. I'll go by boat. Tears glistened in Gracie's eyes. I'll never see you again, will I? You can remember me with the dog. I'll never forget you, she whispered. Never. She put her arms around his neck and kissed him. I wish you wouldn't go. I have to. He picked up the knapsack. Goodbye. He stepped back into the hall and closed the door softly. A minute later, he was outside, hurrying down the street toward the city. He had lied in the note he'd left, and he had lied to Grace. He meant to catch the late-night bus heading up the highway toward Fairbanks. He knew exactly where he'd get off. By the time they missed him in the morning, he'd be off the bus, hiking out across the rolling tundra. He'd be on his way home to Aurora. And that's the end of chapter 13.